I had the chance to meet Emilio, I guess, somewhere in 2023 when we had dinner together and had the chance to introduce him to what City College is all about in the Colin Powell School. And it's a mission and a purpose that immediately resonated with him. And we began conversations about the conversation we'll have today, this event. Just by way of background, Emilio is Director of Marketing for the NBA in Latin America. Before that, he was the Director of Marketing Partnerships in Europe for the NBA. And he brings a career of senior positions in marketing and communications and strategic communications to what he's doing with the NBA today. He's been in New York, he just mentioned 10 years, which means he is in every sense a New Yorker now, and we can ask him how that feels. And we're very pleased to be joined by his wife actually in the back, and grateful that she's with us today too. So thank you for being here. Why don't we take a seat and we'll get into a conversation, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to ask a few questions, but then we want to open it up. So please have questions you might like to share. Thanks for being here. Do you mind starting, tell us a little bit about your background, growing up, where you grew up.
Yeah.
You're not from New York, but you're not even from the United States. You're originally from Spain.
Yeah.
And your kind of path to school and your pathway to your interests.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm from a small town in the southwest of Spain called Badajoz, which is not a very known city. It's very close to Sevilla for those who knows a little bit of the geography of Spain. So raising and born in a small town, it was not easy to have like a good education because the majority of the universities, the good universities, were at the capital in Madrid or in Barcelona. So it was not easy to grow in a small city and having dreams of becoming one day working for the NBA. But I had a passion into sports. I love sports, every kind of sport. I love tennis, soccer, especially soccer because I'm coming from a country where soccer is like a religion. So I was first more into soccer, but then also into basketball because I love at that time, the time of Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and all these great players that really got to my heart and to the heart of all the generations of my age. So that's when I started to love the NBA and I started to love basketball and basketball. So I had one thing very, very sure, and it's that I wanted to dedicate my career to a sport, no matter how. But very soon I realized that I was not going to be a good athlete. So I had to drive my path into sport toward education and towards being an executive because I knew that I had very little chance to become a professional player, either of soccer or basketball. So I then very focused started on a career that helped me to get introduced into sport. And I decided to study journalism because I thought that it was a career that combined very well with the market of sport, in the sense that media and sport are very well connected, and I thought that it was a path to get into sport. So I went to the university, I did my major in communications and journalism, and then after I finalized my degree, I first started to work for a very well-known agency in Spain called Agencia F, which is a news agency that is international. I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to work for 1 year in the sports program that they have, a great sport programs they have. And after a year, they offered me the possibility to continue my work there. But to be honest, the stability, the economic stability was not that great. And I was tempted after a while to go to work for a communication, for a company organization to be the director of the communication for one of the most relevant companies in the real estate in Spain. In that organization, I also had the opportunity to start working in a sponsorship since that organization, we're doing a lot of things related with sports and with sponsorship, and that's when my expertise in sponsorship started to grow. Then after a while, I decided that if I really wanted to be more knowledgeable of marketing and everything that related with the market of sport, I had to get more knowledge. So I got back to the university, and I studied a new career. I studied business economics. And also I did a master's degree in digital marketing, sport digital marketing, and with all that tools on my backpack, I was starting to be able to apply to more specific sport jobs. And so then it came the opportunity to apply for a job in sports in Opel, the motor company, where I was helping the marketing department to expand their portfolio of different sponsorship properties. During my time there, I was kind of heading the activation department for all the brands for all the sport properties that they have. The most relevant is the Champions League, the Soccer Champions League. And after working for Opel, I had the opportunity to apply for a job into the NBA, which for me was kind of a job dream because I always loved the NBA and I always loved sport, but I thought that it was going to be almost impossible to get the job. I find myself not the right fit, not because I was not good enough, but it was like, come on, how can I going to make it into the NBA? That's almost impossible, no? So I started that job application process that lasts almost a year. It was like a nightmare. I had to interview almost 12 people. I interviewed people during the process that leave the organization. That's how long the process was. But it was worth the whole process, even though it was really, really, really long. And after almost a year, I was offered a position to become the director of sponsorship for Europe. So I first started in the sponsorship area in the NBA, and then I can tell you later how was my trip inside the NBA.
So it's a fascinating journey and a very successful one. Let's go back to your childhood, I guess, and kind of growing up. When you say you were always drawn to sports, can you just explain a little bit more kind of how you shaped your interest in sport and how that shaped your pathway to college?
Well, I live in a family that were really crazy about sports, any kind of sports, you name it. I mean, tennis, basketball, soccer, bowling, whatever. I mean, and we were always, I had 3 little brothers, so we were always playing sports when we were little, and we all 3 had a passion for the sport. As a matter of fact, 2 of them were almost professional, were almost made professional in soccer at some point. I was the worst, so I know very clear that if I wanted to make it into sport, it had to be through other ways. But that was basically the first start touch with the sport, no? The passion that all my family had for the sport, that's what sparked the fire inside me to dedicate my life into sports.
And what about, so when you're in college, you major in journalism.
Yeah.
And a number of the people I think in the room are studying journalism, either you're not majoring yet, but minoring in journalism. And many are studying marketing. And put those against each other in some sense, because you went on to study marketing, and of course you are doing marketing.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the choices you make, as a student.
So I think the marketing and journalism are the perfect combination to work in a sport for many reasons, because at the end of the day, what we do in the marketing department is to communicate. The only difference between the communication that we do in marketing versus the communication that our department in communication does is that we pay for the media, and our folks in the communication department, they don't pay for the media. They do it organically. But if you think wise, it is almost the same job. You are selling a product, but you are using different form of communications to sell that product. In marketing, you have different ways of communicating with the customer or with the fan, while in the marketing department, you have other tools, but both of them combined are super powerful to sell your brand at the end of the day, which is what we want. We want to increase our revenue share, our revenue market, and we use communication to grow our brand so that we can get to more followers, we can grow our audience, and we can make our IP rise more beneficial and more rich for everybody, no?
And if you made your journey sound fairly linear. Mm-hmm. That is to say, you worked hard, you had a focus from a very young age, sports, somehow a career in sports. You knew you didn't have the athletic ability to be, the athlete. What were some of the challenges you faced along the way, though, and who helped you or what helped you at various inflection points, particularly early on?
Well, who helped me is sitting on the back of this room, who is my wife, in many times, since she has been a tremendous support for me, in the sense that many times I didn't think that I could make it into the big leagues. I thought that I could somehow earn my life working at sport, but not at the highest level. And that self-confidence in someone to get to the top, it was not easy all times. And that's something that I have to thank her, as well as some other friends that always trust me that I could get to the top level. But I also have to thank myself, even though if it sounds Spanish, because I always thought that I could make it in some form. And what I always had in mind is that I had to focus in those things that I could change, not on those other things that I have no power or ability to. No? There are some times where you think, oh, it's impossible, I cannot get there because this other person is better than me, or because I'm not to the level of that position. So what I try to do in those situations is try to focus on the things that I could do. Try to focus on, for example, education. So I knew that if I work hard on education, I could have a chance, or at least I could have the tools for when the chance come, I could jump into it. I didn't know if the chance was going to come, but at least I was doing what I thought it was my part. And my part was to be ready for when the opportunity come, and I knew that I had to have a strong education. So there are people who probably have right now much more money than I have in my bank account. I have properties. I don't have neither of that, but I have a great education that I pay for it. I spend as much money as I can on it, and I made it happen. So that definitely helped me to get to the position that I am today. So while other people were saving or were trying to do their best to buy a house or to buy a car or whatever, I try to put all my efforts into improving my education as a way to increase my possibilities of getting a job into the sports sector. So when friends were, going out, I was like an athlete, and I was focusing on my studies, focusing on my career path. I have been always very determined, and I have been always very exigent with myself in that sense, because I believe it was the only way to make it to the highest level in sport, which finally came.
And I think you're sharing some really helpful advice, for how others might approach this. So you worked hard on your studies. When it came to finding your first job, how easily did that come to you, and what was the path? What did you have to do in order to kind of both prepare yourself for it and actually ultimately get the offer?
So it was not easy at all because at the time I finalized the career, there were very few opportunities at the journalism, and the whole journalism market was changing. So newspaper went kind of getting down, internet still wasn't up there. So a lot of jobs were getting destroyed in the journalism sector. So it was really hard. So I tried to look for a lot of internship to see where I could get. I was fortunate that I be able to apply for a position in this organization that I told you, Agencia F. And I was selected after different interviews, but it was not an easy process. It took me sometimes almost a year, during which I was trying to knock in every door that I could, try to maximize the contact that I have, and try to, again, as I said before, be ready for if the opportunity came. During that time, I had to obviously work on any kind of job I could. I was doing everything to support myself, but finally I was able to get this internship that it lasts for 1 year. It was a 1-year internship that covered almost all my expenses, but it was not very hard. And if I have to advise you people in that sense, is that you try to knock every single door that you know. Try to maximize all your network, and don't be shy in that sense, because there is a lot of people that are willing to help eager students when they come out of the university, because most of us have been in the same position.
And when you made the jump to the NBA, talk a little bit about what it was like. You couldn't imagine yourself getting into that space. All of a sudden, you found yourself there.
Yeah.
What were some of the first impressions, and how did you carve out what your job was going to be in some sense?
When they told me that they was going to make me an offer to the NBA, I was kind of hallucinating. I was like, I can't believe it. No, I spoke with my family, and it was very, very quick. Everything was quick and fast, because they told me, I was living in Madrid at that time, and they told me, you have to pack your luggage and you have to come 1 month to New York. And you have to spend 1 month here in New York. And it was my first time in New York. So it was amazing coming here to New York, experiencing the NBA. But then it was challenging, because I was first in a company that in culture was totally different to what I had before. And that took me a while to get used to an American company. Although I worked for Opel, Opel at that time was managed by German owners, and the culture was kind of different. But getting used to an American company was much different, especially when you come from a Latin cultural, like in Spain, then you move to an American corporate organization. You see a lot of different in the way people interact, the flexibility, and the work ethic from one culture to another is very different, and it's hard to that. It's very hard. I had to get used to. In Spain, for example, you spend a lot of hours in the company. Like, you can get out of work like at 10 p.m. sometime, but it's not productive, because you spend a lot of time talking to your colleague, having coffee. You almost lost 1 hour having lunch. And when I came here, no, that was completely different. You may go out of work at 6 p.m., but until that time, you're focused on your job and no rest at all. No? That kind of challenges were hard. No? And then the MBA is an organization that is very process-oriented, so getting also used to a company that is very, very, very into the detail was also kind of difficult. That's probably why the NBA is one of the biggest brands in the world, because they are always very focused on the little details. No? And when I arrived to the NBA, I remember the first time. This is a funny history that has to do with these little details that I made. No, the first week that I arrived to the NBA, someone told me that there were 2 tickets to go to a Knicks game. It was one of my first NBA games. So I said, great, so fantastic. I'm open to it. So they gave me the tickets, and all of a sudden I went to the game, and it was I was sitting courtside seat, so right close to all the big celebrities, all-star. I was like, wow, this is the kind of treatment that the NBA give to their new employers. This is awesome. Wow, I really love it. It's amazing. I was kind of, I was flipping out. So when I arrived on Monday to the office, all of a sudden someone told me, "You were the other day in courtside seats, right?" I was, "Yes." "Who gave you the tickets?" And I was like, "I don't know, someone on the ticketing department gave me the ticket." "No, who gave you the ticket?" I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." So I don't know, this person gave me the ticket. Okay. I didn't know more about the thing, but then I realized that those tickets weren't supposed to be for me. Those tickets were supposed to be for Emilio Collins, my boss, who happened to be named as equally as me, Emilio. And after that time, they wrote down a whole memo on how to make sure that we don't mess up with the tickets, and there was a whole process, and I was like, wow, but at least I was able to enjoy courtside seat that time.
Game, exactly. Did he mind?
No, not at all.
That's great. And
sorry, the problem is that he had to sit up in the,
he was there,
in my seat.
So, and tell us about. Many of you are marketing majors or journalism majors, journalism students. What did you join? Like, what was the job at the NBA, and how? Tell us about the various jobs. Like, what does it actually mean to be director of marketing, directing of sponsorships? Tell us what these roles are like and what the scale is.
It's funny because you are not the first person who really asked me, intrigued, what does a marketing director in the NBA do? No, it's like the NBA can be sold by itself. Maybe in the United States can be sold very easily, but not internationally, because internationally you have a lot of competencies. So you really have to do a lot of efforts to be able to stand out from other competition. Like in South America, soccer is more than a religion. I mean, you really need to be strong if you want to compete with soccer, or tennis, or cyclism in Colombia, just to name a few sports that are really, really important in this country. So when we talk about international markets, you really need to do a strong strategic brand exercise to make sure that you can compete with those leagues. So my job inside the NBA is to make sure that our brand is as much relevant as possible in those countries where we are. And first of all, we need to focus on some specific country because our resources are limited, so we cannot focus on Latin America as a whole. We need to focus on very specific countries. For us, the country of priorities are Mexico, Brazil, and then Colombia and Argentina. Not only because they are the 4 most populated, but because they are the ones who has more fan base. And then after that, we have República Dominicana and Puerto Rico as the next priority countries for the NBA. In those countries, my task is to make sure that we get the biggest brand awareness that we can get, so that we can grow our audience, so that when the renewal television deal comes, we can have a higher value and get more revenue for them. But then, on top of that, we have 4 different lines of business in Latin America. 1 is merchandise, 2 is our digital ecosystem of games in internet, the 3rd is sponsorship, and the 4th is selling our television deals. In each one of those categories, I'm responsible for doing the marketing so that our departments can sell better the product. So in the sense, for example, of merchandise, I have a team who help me to increase our sales in merchandise. Equally is similar with our digital games and with our sponsorship and with the television deal. So that's more or less what I do. And for that, What I do is I create marketing campaigns, I manage social media, and I do all the marketing activities necessary to make sure that our revenue growth in line of business.
And just in terms of scale, how big is your team focused on Latin America?
It is much shorter than I would like, to be honest. So I have a team of people in Mexico who handles the marketing for that country. I have one marketing director in Mexico and 3 people reporting to them, and the director of Mexico reports to me. That's the structure. Then I have the same structure in Brazil, one marketing director that reports directly to me, and then 3 persons reports under her. And then I have also here 2 persons that reports directly to me. And these 2 persons take over the responsibilities for the rest of Latin America. This is the composition of my team. And then I have a dotted line. I report to the head of the region. I directly report to the head of the region, but I have a dotted line to the CMO of the MBA. That's more or less.
So I got 2 more questions for me, and then we're going to open it up. And I was going to ask them in reverse order, but based on what you just said that you report to the CEO of the MBA, I'll ask this one first, which was just share. You must have a bunch of really cool things you've gotten to see and do, and maybe share. I'm sure there's folks in this room who care about the NBA. What have you gotten to do by virtue of this job, and what have you learned about the NBA in some sense that probably the rest of us don't know?
Well, it's amazing the journey that I've done in the NBA. When players retire from the NBA and they say, "Oh, I've been 7 years in the NBA," I am like, I know what you've been through. Like, I know how hard it is to be 7 years in the NBA, because it's like 1 year in the NBA is like a dog year. No, it's like 7 years of your life. No, it's that hard. It's very exciting, but at the same time, it's very intense and very difficult sometimes, because, as I was mentioning to you it's a very process-focused company. There is a joke in the NBA that MBA stands for nothing but attorneys, and yes, we have a lot of lawyers that we have to deal with them every single day, and that's a challenge. You learn a lot, but at the same time, it's a struggle. No, if I have to say something that I learned during those years in the MBA, is to be very organized, to be very focused, to make sure that everything is perfect. And it's funny because I had the opportunity to be with the marketing director of Ferrari at some point a couple of months ago, and I asked him, so what do you think that make Ferrari such a big and such a powerful brand? And he told me something very similar to what I see in the NBA, is we focus on every little detail to make that everything is perfect. And those are 2 things that replicate in the same companies. And I think that most successful companies has this spirit, has this soul of perfection, and that goes with you everywhere. I'm sure that will come with me everywhere I go. If I sum to the New York state of mind, then I think I'm a ninja in my next in my next assessment.
And last question I want to ask, and then we're going to open it up. Advice, you've shared some advice along the path here, but just advice for folks in this room who are just beginning, who, one of the things we worry about all the time is just the sense that students can often have that, like, gosh, these opportunities aren't available, or how the heck could I be personally somebody that could get something like this? You're, living proof that in fact it can happen, but advice that you would share with college students about how to take the next step in their journey towards a career?
Well, first of all, what I would say is, if you really have a passion for sport or for whatever you do, really believe in you, because that's the only thing that is gonna really open your doors. Believe in you, and it's not a phrase made. It's really the key of successful, having open and positive attitude can open much more doors than any degree. So what I would recommend you is that you always have a positive attitude, that you always believe that you can make it, that you can make progress even if little, and be humble, because there is nothing, at least in my opinion, that has killed more careers, executive careers, than not being humble. And I think that's also fundamental to success in the corporative work. And then if you are not interested in working corporate, you want to have your own business, you have to have a very commercial mentality, open your network, be sure that you need to be open to have to mingle, to expand your network, to get into new opportunities when they come, and have your mind open. And also very important, as I said before, at the very beginning, try to knock every single door, even if you think it's almost impossible. I know of a case of someone who knocking the doors, study art history, I'm not going to say the name, but knocking the door once, send a CV to the auction house called Sotheby's, one of the most Christie's, one of the most renowned auction house. And when this person was writing the letter, I was like, how come you're going to do that? It's impossible that they call you. Well, they called her. So don't give up in that sense, and touch every door, for very crazy you might think it sounds.
Let's open it up for questions. Who has one? Yeah, thank you.
No, it's very important, because when you talk, at the beginning when I started to speak about Latin American, people thought that Latin America was a country by itself. Latin America is formed by 50 countries, and each country has different culture, different mentality, different ways of acting. And one of the few things that unifies all of them is the language, and not even in the case of Brazil, where they speak Portuguese. So one of the things that I was very focused when I arrived to the MBA is making sure that the same strategy that we use for Puerto Rico is not the same strategy we need for Colombia or we need for Argentina, that they are very different in all sense. So we are very keen to make sure that every country has a different strategy that is tailored to their fan base, so that we can tap into the interests and the drivers that fan base has, so that we are able to grow our audience. So if we, for example, talk about Colombia, we do a lot of activity with cyclism, or with soccer stars in Colombia, or with very selected influencers in Colombia, that we know that doesn't apply for Puerto Rico or doesn't apply for República Dominicana. In República Dominicana, we do more with baseball players, for example, who are more well known in República, while in Argentina, we would never do anything with a baseball player, because they don't practice at all and they don't even watch baseball. No? So those particularities are very important when you attack a market. And that was something that I had to somehow teach the people inside the MBA when we first started, because they saw Latin America as a whole country, as a whole region, and they didn't understand very well the nuances and particularities of each country. So we try to be consistent with the brand, so that we show a unifying, cohesive image, in all our campaign. But we change the messages and we localize, not entirely, but we localize our campaign depending on the country. But we try to have that cohesive image or branding image. Like, for example, right now we are finalizing a commercial, and in that particular commercial we have players who talk in different kind of Spanish, and we change the players and we change the tones depending on what country. So the commercial is the same for all the countries, but those players speaking in Spanish with that accent, with that differentiation in accents, depends on what country we're going to. So in that sense, we are able to maintain the same level of cohesion in terms of image for the brand, but we are able to localize depending on the country.
And can I ask a follow-up on that, which is how do you figure out what to do in the country? In other words, do you do focus groups, or do you hire firms within country to help you figure it out?
Well, first of all, the most important thing is that we have a team of persons in Mexico who kind of test the waters of how things they feel in the country, and also in Brazil. So in Brazil and Mexico, it's much easier to have that knowledge, although we still run a lot of research, quantitative and qualitative, to make sure that we get as much information from our fans as possible so that we can tailor the communication specifically to our fan base. But then there are other countries where we don't have offices, and we run less research than we do in other countries. In those particular cases, we follow what the research tells us, but we also make sure that we travel as much as we can to those countries so that we can also get in contact with the people, and we can hear from them also what they really like, what they don't. Let me put you an example. So very recently I went to Argentina. I spent 1 week in Argentina. We have research in Argentina that told us that the NBA was not hot at that moment. But when I was there, I saw totally the opposite. I saw that the NBA was really, really hot. I saw that the NBA still had a really strong engagement with the fan base. So that two ways of information give me a lot of weight onto what I should do and what I shouldn't do in my next step. If I would only follow what the research says, I would probably haven't done anything in Argentina during the next year. But after going there, speaking with the people, feeling on site how things really feel it, I was able to, or I was kind of inclined to do more with celebrity and influencers, and it worked really well according to the metrics that we receive. Yeah, well, it's very interesting because we went from doing a lot of events. I'm going to talk specifically about the work that we did in Latin America. I'm not going to focus what we did during the bubble and around the bubble in the United States, but focus more on my work and our work in Latin America. So it was challenging because we had planned almost 25 events, physical events, and we have to cancel all of them. But all of a sudden, we had a lot of commitments with our sponsors, and we still need to be able to engage with our fans. So from one day to another, we turned into a digital company, just like this, because we had still to deliver those rights to our sponsors, but we didn't have physically any assets to deliver. So we had to convert all those events into digital events, and it was quite a big challenge in terms of production, in terms of managing all that production. So people would think, well, but it's not the same to do a physical event rather than a digital event. That is true, but it's also true that at that moment, it was not easy to find teams who could work in developing the kind of digital assets that we want to deliver our sponsors. Take into consideration that sponsors pay a lot of money for drive the brand awareness, and for all of a sudden we were telling them that they were going to have 25 physical events, and all of a sudden they have nothing. So we have to come out with a strategy very quick to to put down the fire, and it was to transform all those events into digital events. And to be honest, social media play a magnificent role in that sense. During the pandemic, we grew our social media by almost 40% in Latin America. That gave us a strong position in order to also offer our sponsors a higher engagement with our audience, which really satisfies them. And we saw that drop in the digital engagement after the pandemic, but nonetheless, the brands still value a lot the physical experience, though. It's funny because in Latin America we don't have like top players. Not now, not in the past. In the past, the only top players we had was Manu Ginobili, who was really great player. He made it to the All-Star 4 times, and it helped us a lot to grow our market in general. Whenever you have a local players that is playing, this is very important. It's not like a random player. You need to have a player that is playing and that it have a lot of protagonism in the play, so that you can use that player to build your market. We have had, for example, 9 Brazilian players who barely play any NBA game, and it was like it didn't make any difference. But we have Manu Ginobili, who used to play almost every game, and that really make a difference in Argentina. That make Argentina really hot for the NBA. In Mexico, it happened as well in the past when we had Young and other big players. But the problem that we have in Latin America is that we don't have that big names like in Europe, for example. When I was in Europe, now you have a lot of people from coming from Europe or from Africa, and these players can really help you to grow your market. But you can't rely on them because it's not up to you, and you don't have any influence in being able to have players from your country. So you need to make sure that it's the brand, the one who really stands out, and not the players. The players, let me tell you, from a marketing perspective, are like a complement of the brand. If you have it, perfect. But if you don't have it, you still need to have something. And the brand is the most important thing. When all the companies comes to the NBA, they come to the NBA because they want the NBA logo, they want the NBA culture, and on top of that, if we can add players to that is fantastic. I mean, obviously, if you can add LeBron, or you can add Stephen Curry, or you can add this kind of names, always add a lot of value to the partnership. But even if we don't add those names, the NBA by itself has a great value for the organization. So my takeaway here, or my answer to you would say, is that yes, these players affect the market very strong, but the most important thing is what I have learned during the years, that the most important thing is the brand, because players comes and goes, but the brands stay. The only one that really make a difference for always is Michael Jordan. So even though today, even the kids today love Michael Jordan, they haven't seen it play, and they still love Michael Jordan. That's the only, I would say, player that really makes the difference, and is as big as the NBA. There is a lot of countries, not now. Right now, there are a few countries where the NBA is not at least a little bit popular. But when I started in the NBA, for example, in Spain, we started from scratch. I mean, there were few fan base, a few NBA fans in Spain, and we had to almost start from scratch, making sure that the NBA got more popular, especially because of the time difference. So the games we have even a harder time to promote the NBA in Spain because the game happened at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. at night, and people has to wake up at that time to see the NBA. So we had to work in a strategy on how to make relevant sport for people who we know they were not going to see the games on live, but at the next day they were going to see the highlights. So we work, for example, with a lot of media to make sure that they promote those highlights so that people could get into it. We bring a lot of players to the country. We did a lot of events during the summer in the country so that the brand started to get more relevance. We started to introduce the NBA into the into the schools. We did a basketball NBA tournament into a school. Today is a very famous tournament called Junior NBA, but at that time was starting, and we were partnering with a school with kids between 6 and 12 years to make sure that they play basketball, and we give away NBA jersey and NBA apparel so that they can, and we organize also league for them, and building that fan base from when they were very young is giving now the results that we wanted, because we knew that if we were able to engage with the fan at a young age to make kids becoming fan of the NBA at a young age, they were going to be fans of the NBA for life, no? So we worked very hard on the youth in the first stage, and that's still the strategy that we follow in those countries where the NBA is not big. We go to the schools, we try to engage with the kids, we make sure that we make apparel available for them, we organize their league, we sort out content to them so that they can get used to the NBA, and not only to what happened inside the court, but also outside the court. That's something that it is very relevant. And we changed our form of communication. At the beginning, we were partnering with media, with linear televisions, with broadcasters, regular broadcasters. Nowadays, we do everything on social media, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, etc., because we know that the form to consume has changed, and we had to adapt to it. So while when I was in Spain 10 years ago, we partnered with media to express our word, to spread our word in media, in traditional media, we now have everything in chain and do everything in social media. And we work a lot with influencers, young influencers, celebrities, musicians. We try to tap into other areas where we know we can sum and we can create more fan base. For example, there is a connection between music and the NBA. You can imagine, it's amazing. In the space of Latin America, the reggaetoners are hardcore basketball fans. They love basketball, and their fan base love basketball. So we saw an opportunity there to make a connection with their fan base. Those kind of things helps a lot in countries where the NBA is not like a very well-known sport. Being able to tap into those other interests that tap to the fans, it's very important. Okay, first of all, is what I would tell you is the education is, I would say, is key in that sense. Try to pivot to and focus on a specific subject into the sport is very important, because we, for example, in the case of the NBA, we recruit very little general we recruit more specialists in particular areas of sport. We recruit a lot of professionals that focus on data, for example, right now. Just to put you an example, we recruit a lot for people who have experience in sponsorship, in selling sponsorship. We recruit a lot of professionals who also have a background on media, for example. So what I would say is that you try to focus, first of all, in something that you really like. And second is to try to use university educations and courses to make sure that you kind of specialize in a particular area of a sport that you want to develop. Otherwise, if you are a generalist in business, it's going to be harder for you and for an organization or for a big league to hire someone like that. So there are two different kind of TV deals. One is the domestic one, who also includes some international rights, and there is the local rights that we are able to negotiate into the country. So basically, after this domestic deal happens, we know exactly what is carved out and what can we sell in the different country. Based on that, we approach the different televisions and we start negotiation with them. Selling television deals is not difficult because you always have televisions interested on the deal. The problem is to get the money that is expected to get. No? The problem is to get to the level of revenue that you expect. And for that, it's essential to be able to demonstrate that the ratings are growing. And nowadays, it's very difficult because the ratings are stagnant because of social media, because how people consume media nowadays. Therefore, it's difficult to increase the revenue of television deals year over year as in the past. Right now, we are focusing more on how to also maximize our business with social media and with social media players. How we can monetize all the content that we have put out there in social media and how we are able to extract the maximum value of them through our deals with Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. Again, it depends on country and country. We cannot make a generalization on how it's consumed. But let me put you the example of Argentina, for example. I'm going to put Argentina now as an example, which is a very particular strange situation where 98% of the people still watch the NBA through paid television. If you want to see the NBA, you need to have paid television to watch the NBA. Otherwise, what you can see is the highlight on social media. And so therefore, television there has a strong, let's say, weight in the form of how they consume. But in the case, for example, of Brazil, and with Argentina, we have only one television deal. So there is only one cable that airs the games there. Except from ESPN. ESPN has a package of games that air through the whole continent. And then there are other games that we can sell to different televisions. In the case of Argentina, we sell all those games with one television. And it's 98% of the population who has access to cable TV, who needs to have, and the only way to do it is through pay television. But for example, in Brazil we have open television, we have Amazon, and we have also Globo, where people can watch game, and we also show games live in YouTube. So the offers is more open. You doesn't really need to have paid television to watch game, but the best games are in paid television. That's more or less, and more or less is the same for the rest of the countries. let me put you the example. I mean, for example, every single celebrity that we have brought, every single local celebrity from Latin America that we have brought to an NBA game has created enormous amount of media exposure in the particular country. At the beginning, we were not very fan of bringing super top celebrity from outside of the United States to NBA games because we didn't really see the value. But that changed when I brought Neymar, the footballer, to an NBA final game, and I was able to introduce him to Stephen Curry. And since that moment, they became great friends. And it was so high, the kind of media exposure that they were able to achieve, that Nike changed his strategy and started to sign a lot of more basketball players and cement and foster that relationship between soccer and basketball. And it was very, very profitable for Nike. So that's the kind of engagement and noise that relationship make. And I can tell you many more of other celebrities that had come. Very recently, we have had at the Knicks games a very famous singer called Peso Pluma. I don't know if any of you heard of him, and his partner Nicky Nicole went to a game, and it was amazing the kind of noise that we were able to generate around Latin America, but not only around Latin America, but also here in the United States into the Hispanic population, because let's not forget that these global stars are not only stars that resonate in Latin America, they are global stars. Or when we brought Bonnie many times to games, the kind of in the level of noise that we are able to create with this star is amazing. Not only with footballers but with musicians. So we try also to partner with local brands also to make sure that we are able to create more noise in those spaces where we are not so much relevant, and things that we would never do here in the United States, we can do it in countries like, I don't know, in Colombia or Chile or Argentina. We are able to partner with a brand in Chile who help us to get to the young audience, like the Brecht Party, which is a company that creates music festivals in the summer. And this kind of activities, we are more, let's say, more free to do it in countries outside of the United States, where we are not as big as in the US, and help us to grow extensively our brand. I am also remembering when we brought Rosalia to one of our games, or we brought Karol G, or this kind of global celebrities that are more connected to Latin America but are global stars. And then is when this really changed the game, and the NBA started to see this kind of celebrities as a real game changer for our global audience. Mm-hmm. Well, I think in today's world it's very important not only the physical presence but also the digital, right? And being constant, I would say, it's a job that takes very long time, and the more important thing is to be constant, even digital or physically, because otherwise, with time, fade. Those relationships fade, and make sure that you make relations with people that you really would like to work for or work with. I met people where I know after 1 second that he is really relevant, but I will never work with this person. So first, being authentic with the relationships that you do, and second, be very constant and use all the digital tools that you have on your hand, but also try to make it possible to do it physically as well. Being able to attend summits, to attend speaking opportunities, all these kind of events help a lot to nurture this relationship, because at the end of the day, I receive probably 100 invitation every day in LinkedIn. As you can imagine, I mean, you cannot really, I don't even have time to accept all the invitation that I receive in LinkedIn, no? So there are channels that are totally saturated to network. So what I would recommend is to try to get outside the box and look for those tools that are not that saturated and can help you to make those connections and be consistent with it. Don't get bored and don't get, you know, bored. Yeah, don't try as much as you can. So in my particular case was just like, I would say I was lucky because I born in a city that is right in the border with Portugal, and because of that we have a lot of interaction with Portuguese people, and that made me have more interaction with Portuguese people. So it was not something that I planned for, that I said I'm going to study that, but it came very naturally in that sense. And then being able to work in Brazil also gave me the opportunity to practice Portuguese and be more fluent. So that was great. And then English it was also very natural because we learned it in school, but there was also something very important because I mean, English in the Spanish education system is horrible. You can study 10 years of English and you don't speak a word of English. So for me it was very, very important to travel and speak the language abroad. So I spent time when I could traveling to speaking English countries so that I can improve my English. So that's also very important. But you know, the good things here in the United States that most people speak almost two languages, no? Because there is so many racial backgrounds that people speak either Spanish and English, or Indies and English, or Chinese and English, and that rich culture, I would ask you not to or try to foster. Let's not try to get away from it, no? Because I have seen many people who try to somehow stay away from his second culture, and I think that's a mistake, because if you have the opportunity to master another language, rather because you have family who speak that language or because you have heritage in a particular culture, please use it. Use it, because that's going to be a competitive advantage towards many people. And I would tell you that you here have more opportunity in that sense than in other countries. I have to travel away to be able to speak other languages. Here I can speak Spanish, I can speak Portuguese, I can speak English. So you here has an international head that you can practice many languages. So don't miss that opportunity. Don't miss it. The other day I was, and this was funny because this was something that took me, that surprised me very much. I was in Indiana for the All-Star, and I had the opportunity to talk with Jaylen Brown, the Celtic player, and I was speaking with him, and all of a sudden he turned out into Spanish and said, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, it really impacted me, no? And it might sound stupid, but when you see someone who make the effort to speak in your language, it really, change your vision about the other person and make a strong impact. So you have that opportunity. Please don't miss it.
Okay, last question.
You
We're going
talked
to
about being detail-oriented, or the NBA being detail-oriented. Were you always detail-oriented? And what's your advice to people whose inclination might not be to emphasize details so much?
I was 100% not detail oriented before I was in the NBA. that doesn't mean that I was chaotic and disastrous, but I came from a culture where things happen more organically and tends to be less planned ahead, which also have good things, don't get me wrong, because sometimes being so organized kills the creativity and the flexibility to improvise. But when the improvisation becomes the normal, it's not a good sign, no? So now being more oriented into detail has helped me a lot to be more diligent, to be more efficient, and to always have a plan B, to have contingent, to be able to overcome contingencies, I would say. So in that sense, it helped me a lot to be a better professional.
We're out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank
Please
you
join me
very
in
much.
thanking Emilio.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much
Thank
for
you.
being here.